This 4-year-old beggar girl sees a millionaire's wife burying her own baby. But she saw everything and does something that shocked everyone. Watch until the end. Comment what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10. I really want to know if you liked my story and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The punishing August sun in Oak Haven, Georgia, turned the dirt roads into furnaces that burned Lily's bare feet. At 4 years old, the girl already knew every corner of this rural county better than most adults. An orphan since she was 2, she had learned to survive by scavenging leftovers from the town's farmer's market, sleeping under awnings, and hiding from the pitiful glances that always came with threats about child protective services. On that sweltering morning, while rummaging through wooden crates for fruit forgotten by the vendors, a strange sound cut through the distant hum of the town. Desperate sobs, like those of a wounded animal, came from the direction of the vacant lot next to the municipal cemetery. Lily hesitated. Her life on the streets had taught her that curiosity could be dangerous, but there was something in that cry that touched a part of her that still remembered being cared for by someone. Walking cautiously among the dry weeds and debris scattered across the abandoned land, she spotted a female figure kneeling on the cracked earth. The woman held something small against her chest, rocking back and forth, while muttering words Lily couldn't quite understand. They were prayers mixed with desperate pleas. Magnolia Hawthorne, at 28, was unrecognizable. Her brown hair, always impeccably styled for social events at the estate, now hung dirty and tangled over a face marked by tears and despair. The cotton dress she had worn to escape was torn and stained with dirt. In her arms, a baby of a few months lay motionless, its lips purplish and its skin strangely cold in the suffocating heat. The girl approached slowly, her large, curious eyes fixed on the small being that didn't seem to be breathing. Magnolia looked up as she sensed the presence, revealing a face ravaged by terror and exhaustion. For a moment, the two stared at each other in silence, a wealthy woman who had lost everything and a poor child who had never had anything. He's gone," Magnolia whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "My little Leo. I couldn't protect him." Lily tilted her head, observing the baby with the attention she had learned to give to details others ignored. Something wasn't right. In her life on the streets, she had found injured animals, unconscious people, and she knew how to recognize when someone had truly passed from this world. Without hesitation, she extended her small, dirty hand and touched the baby's neck. The pulse was there, faint, almost imperceptible, but present. The skin still held some warmth, even if less than it should. Lily had seen this before with abandoned puppies in the winter. It wasn't death, it was the body trying to protect itself from the extreme cold. "He's alive," the girl said with the certainty of one who had learned to distinguish life from absence in the most difficult situations. Magnolia stopped crying instantly, her eyes widening. "What did you say?" "Your baby's alive. He's just real cold." Lily touched the small body again. "You need to warm him up, fast." Magnolia's trembling hands returned to examine her son, this time with hope instead of despair. The tiny chest rose and fell, almost imperceptibly, and when she put her ear close to his nose, she could feel a weak but steady breath. The gratitude that flooded her heart was as intense as the terror that followed. How had she reached this state? How could a mother not realize her son was still alive? The last 48 hours blurred in her mind like a confused nightmare. The violent argument with her father-in-law, Walter, at the Hawthorne Ridge estate, the accusations of madness, the threats of forced commitment to a psychiatric clinic, her desperate escape in the middle of the night, taking only Leo and the clothes on her back. "Did you run away from home?" Lily asked, with the frankness only children possess. Magnolia nodded, pressing the baby against her chest in an attempt to warm him. "I ran from very bad people who wanted to hurt us." "I know a place," the girl said after a moment's thought. "No one will find you there." And so began an unlikely friendship between a child who had lost everything too soon and a woman who had just discovered what it truly meant to lose. Lily guided Magnolia through paths only she knew, through alleys and trails that went unnoticed by adults, until they reached an abandoned shack on the outskirts of town. The place had served as a storage unit for an auto repair shop that had gone bankrupt years ago. It had plywood walls, a tin roof with holes in some places, and a dirt floor, but it offered protection from the sun and some privacy. Lily had slept there a few times when the nights were too cold or when she needed to hide. "Nobody comes here," the girl explained, helping Magnolia settle in a corner where there were some old cardboard boxes. "But you'll need food and medicine for the baby." Magnolia looked around the precarious environment that had become her refuge and felt a mixture of gratitude and dread. She was safe for now, but for how long? And how would she care for Leo in these conditions? Her delicate hands, accustomed only to embroidery and the light domestic tasks of a wealthy estate owner, trembled as she realized she would have to learn to survive in a way she had never imagined. "Why are you helping me?" she asked Lily. The girl shrugged with the naturalness of someone who had long stopped asking questions about life's injustices. "Because I know what it's like to be alone and scared." Oh, as the day wore on and baby Leo gradually regained his color and normal breathing in his mother's arms, neither of them suspected that their escape had triggered a relentless search. At the Hawthorne Ridge estate, Walter Hawthorne paced his office, the phone glued to his ear as he spoke to someone who promised quick and discreet results. $50,000 for anyone who brings precise information on her whereabouts, he said, his voice laced with a coldness that would make anyone tremble. "I need her to sign some important papers, and I can't wait much longer." On the other end of the line, Arthur Vance, a private investigator known for his efficiency in delicate cases, jotted down details in a worn notebook. $50,000 was enough money to motivate a thorough search, and he knew exactly where to start. 3 weeks had passed since Lily found Magnolia in that vacant lot, and the precarious routine they had established in the abandoned shack was beginning to show its cruel limitations. Baby Leo, who had recovered from the episode of hypothermia, now cried constantly from hunger, but the powdered formula Lily managed to beg for or steal from local markets was never enough. Magnolia had lost more than 20 pounds. Her sunken eyes reflected not only the lack of adequate nutrition, but the constant terror of being found. Every different noise in the neighborhood made her jump, clutching Leo to her chest as if he might disappear again. Her hands, once soft and well cared for, were now calloused and dirty, marked by small cuts from the dry branches she used for makeshift fires. "He needs vitamins," she murmured one morning, observing how her son had grown thinner and paler. "And I need to eat better if I want to keep nursing." Lily knew the situation was becoming unsustainable, but she also knew that going out for more resources meant exposing herself to the dangers of the streets. During her forays into the town's markets and pharmacies, she had noticed a tall man in a dark suit asking questions about a young woman with a baby. The stranger was offering money for information, and it made the girl's stomach churn with anxiety. It was on one of these desperate outings that Lily made the mistake that would change everything. The Oak Valley Grocers was in the central part of Oakhaven, and she had managed to slip in unnoticed by following a large family. She was hiding cans of condensed milk under her shirt when a heavy hand landed on her shoulder. Well, what do we have here?" said Marvin Stokes, the store manager, his thick fingers squeezing the girl's arm painfully. "A little thief." Marvin was a man in his early 40s, paunchy and bald, known in town for his mean streak and malicious comments about the families who shopped at the market. He had grown up poor like Lily, but upon getting the manager's job, he had developed a special cruelty towards anyone who reminded him of his humble origins. "I'm not doing anything," Lily lied, trying to break free, but the noisy cans betrayed her attempt. "Oh no, and what are these?" He shook the girl, making the cans fall to the floor with a loud crash. Other customers started to look, some with pity, others with disapproval. "I'm calling the police. A street kid like you should be in an institution." Panic seized Lily. She had spent her entire childhood avoiding adults who talked about institutions and child protective services. She knew that being taken away would mean never being able to help Magnolia and Leo, who depended completely on her for survival. "Please don't," she pleaded, tears starting to well up. "I need this food." "Need it?" Marvin smirked cruelly. "For who? You live alone, don't you? Or is there someone hiding out there I should know about?" The question hit Lily like a punch. Did he suspect something? Or was it just gratuitous cruelty? She tried to keep her face neutral, but her hands were visibly trembling. "I'm just hungry," she muttered. Marvin studied her for a long moment, his small, cunning eyes noticing details others would miss. The girl was cleaner than usual for a street kid. Her clothes had been recently washed, and she was specifically taking baby items along with the food. "You know what?" he said finally, dragging her to the office in the back of the market. "I'm not going to call the police today, but you're going to do me a favor." The office smelled of cheap cigarettes and sweat. There were papers scattered everywhere, calendars with scantily clad women on the walls, and an old faux leather chair behind a scratched-up desk. Marvin pushed her into a smaller chair and sat in front of her, crossing his fat arms. "You wander all over town, don't you? You see a lot of things adults don't." He leaned forward, bringing his face close to hers. "I want you to tell me when you see rich families doing strange things, people leaving home with suitcases, arguments, that sort of thing." "Why?" Lily asked, confused. "Because information is worth money, kid. And you need food." He opened a drawer and pulled out a few coins. "Every week you come here and tell me what you've seen. I'll give you money to buy what you need. But if you try to trick me or stop showing up, I'll call CPS on the spot." Lily took the coins with trembling hands. It was a small amount, but enough to buy milk and some fruit. It was also a trap from which she saw no escape. "Okay," she said softly. "Great. And Lily?" He knew her name. "How?" "If you're hiding someone, you'd better tell me soon. I'm good at finding out secrets, and I don't like it when people try to make a fool of me." She left the market with her heart pounding, the coins burning in her hand like hot coals. How did he know her name? Who else was looking for information about her? And most importantly, how long could she deceive him before he found out about Magnolia? Back at the shack, she found Leo's mother sleeping restlessly, the baby nestled in her arms. There was something so fragile about the scene that it made Lily's chest tighten. For the first time in her short but difficult life, she felt truly responsible for someone. It wasn't just pity or charity. It was a new and frightening feeling that made her want to protect these two people, even if it cost her own safety. "Did you get anything?" Magnolia asked, waking as Lily approached. "I did," the girl replied, showing the coins and avoiding telling her about the encounter with Marvin. "I'll get more tomorrow." But as she prepared a diluted bottle for Leo, with the milk she had managed to buy, Lily couldn't stop thinking about the manager's threatening words. There was something in the way he spoke that suggested he knew about their situation. What if he already knew about Magnolia? What if he was just toying with her before selling the information to the highest bidder? That night, as Magnolia hummed softly to the baby in an attempt to get him to sleep, Lily lay awake, watching the shadows that the flames of the makeshift fire cast on the walls of the shack. For the first time since becoming an orphan, She had something to lose. And that feeling was both wonderful and terrifying. Across town, in the office of the Hawthorne Ridge estate, Walter Hawthorne received a phone call that made him smile for the first time in weeks. "Found anything?" he asked, adjusting his reading glasses. "I haven't located your daughter-in-law yet," Arthur Vance replied on the other end of the line, "but I've identified some interesting leads. There's a street kid who's been making strange moves around town, buying specific items, asking for information about baby medicine. It could be a lead. Keep investigating. And Arthur." Walter drummed his fingers on the solid wood desk. "Raise the offer, $100,000 for whoever brings Magnolia back, alive and willing to cooperate." And the January heat made the shack almost unbearable during the day. Magnolia had improvised a ventilation system using pieces of cardboard and cut plastic bottles, but the air remained stuffy and heavy. Leo cried more frequently, his delicate skin developing rashes that refused to heal in the constant humidity. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and Lily knew she had to find a solution before it was too late. It was on one of these suffocating mornings that she first crossed paths with Teresa Miller. The 67-year-old woman was walking slowly down the street, carrying a heavy bag, her face marked by the weariness of someone who had worked her entire life without rest. Her grey hair was tied in a simple bun, and she wore a faded cotton dress that had seen better days. Lily watched her from a distance, noticing how Teresa would stop every so often to rest, putting the bag on the ground and massaging her back with a grimace of pain. There was something in the woman's posture that reminded Lily of her own vulnerability, a fragility she recognized because she carried it within herself. "Need some help, ma'am?" Lily asked, approaching shyly. Teresa looked up surprised. She was used to people's indifference, especially from children, who usually avoided poor women like her. But there was something different about this girl, a seriousness in her eyes that didn't match her age. "You're too small to carry weight, dear," she replied kindly, "but thank you for the offer." "I'm stronger than I look," Lily insisted, and maybe you have something you don't need anymore, clothes, food, anything. I can work for you in exchange." Teresa studied the girl carefully. She knew hunger when she saw it. She recognized desperation disguised as an offer of help. During her 40 years working as a housekeeper in family homes, she had seen many children in precarious situations, but few with the determination she perceived in this little one. "What's your name?" "Lily." "I'm Teresa. And you know what, Lily? I could really use some help carrying these groceries home. If you want, you can have lunch with me today. I made too much chicken and dumplings." Lily's eyes lit up, but she quickly hid her enthusiasm. She had learned to be wary of offers that were too generous, especially from adults. But her empty stomach spoke louder than her caution. Teresa's house was in a simple neighborhood on the outskirts, a small brick building with a tiny yard where she grew some herbs and spices. Inside, everything was clean and organized, despite the old furniture and walls that needed a new coat of paint. There was a welcoming smell of home-cooked food that made Lily's stomach rumble audibly. "Sit there at the table, and I'll get you a plate," Teresa said, pointing to a small formica table with 2 chairs. "It's been a while since I had company for lunch." As she heated the food on the gas stove, Teresa watched Lily discreetly. The girl looked at everything around her with an almost desperate attention, as if memorizing every detail. Her clothes were clean, but mended in several places, and she had a thinness that went beyond her natural build. "Do you live alone, Lily?" The question made the girl choke on the spoonful of food she had just put in her mouth. "Sort of," she answered evasively. "Sort of how?" It's complicated to explain." Teresa nodded, not pushing. She had learned that forcing confidences usually pushed away the people who needed help the most. Instead, she began to talk about her own life as they ate. "I've been working for a family for 15 years. The Andersons are good people. They treat me well, but the pay isn't much. I have 2 grown sons who live in Atlanta, and they send me a little money when they can." She paused, watching how Lily devoured the food. "Sometimes I think how nice it would be to have a granddaughter to spoil." Something in Teresa's affectionate tone struck a sensitive chord in Lily's heart. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her that way, with genuine affection, that she felt her eyes well up. She quickly blinked back the tears. "You're very kind," she murmured. "No, I'm not, dear. I just know what it's like to be in need." Teresa got up and came back with a plastic bag. "Look, I have some clothes here that a former employer gave me. They're for a child, but I never used them because my sons were already grown. Want to take a look?" The clothes were simple but well preserved, much better than anything Lily had ever owned. There were also some empty plastic containers and a small flannel blanket that was a bit faded but still perfectly usable. Can I really take them?" "Of course you can. And you know what else? If you want to come by every now and then to help me with chores, I can always make an extra plate. It's not much, but I want to." Lily interrupted, more excited than she meant to show. "I can sweep, wash dishes, anything." Teresa smiled, feeling her heart warm. There was something about this girl that awakened a maternal instinct in her that she thought she had lost when her children grew up and moved away. It wasn't just the obvious hunger and abandonment. It was an inner strength, a determination to survive that impressed and moved her at the same time. "Then it's a deal. You can come here every Tuesday and Friday around noon. I'll give you lunch and a few things to take with you." Lily left Teresa's house with her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. The bag of clothes and supplies felt like an invaluable treasure. But even more important was the feeling of having found someone who cared about her without wanting anything in return. For the first time since becoming an orphan, she was experiencing something similar to what she imagined a grandmother's love to be. Back at the shack, she found Magnolia in a fit of silent crying. Leo was sleeping restlessly in her arms, and she was rocking her body back and forth in a hypnotic, desperate motion. "What happened?" Lily asked, dropping the bag and running to kneel beside her. "I can't do this anymore," Magnolia sobbed. "I can't pretend everything is okay, that we can live like this. He needs a doctor, he needs vitamins, a clean place to sleep, and I don't know how to do anything. I've always had servants for everything. I never learned to fend for myself." For the first time, Magnolia completely broke down. The words came out in a desperate torrent, telling of her life on the estate, of how her marriage had been arranged by her father to pay off gambling debts, of how Walter had always treated her like an intruder in the family. "He mixed medicine in my food during my pregnancy," she revealed between sobs. "He said they were vitamins, but I was always sleepy, confused. And when Leo was born, he started spreading rumors that I had depression, that I wasn't right in the head. He wanted to commit me to a clinic to have full control over the land I inherited from my father." Lily listened in silence, her small hands gently stroking Magnolia's hair in a comforting gesture she had learned from watching other mothers with their children back when she still had a family. "We'll figure something out," she said with a conviction she didn't know where it came from. "I found a lady who can help us. She's good and she's alone too. We can't involve anyone else, Lily. It's too dangerous. So what do you want to do? Stay here until Leo gets really sick?" The blunt question made Magnolia stop crying. She looked at the girl's serious face, seeing in her a practical wisdom that her privileged upbringing had never given her. Lily was right. They needed help, and staying isolated was becoming more dangerous for Leo than any other risk. "Tell me about this lady," she said, wiping her tears. As Lily described her encounter with Teresa, neither of them noticed the figure watching the shack from a distance through binoculars. Arthur Vance had been discreetly following the girl all afternoon, and now he was sure he had found what he was looking for. His phone vibrated in his pocket. It was Walter, impatient for news. "I found them," he said quietly into the device. "A young woman with a baby hiding in an abandoned shack. The street kid I've been investigating is involved. Do you want me to move in now?" "Not yet," Walter replied after a pause. "Keep watching. I want to be absolutely sure before I act. And Arthur. When the time comes, I want it to be discreet. It can't look like I had any direct involvement." Lily's first visit to Teresa's house had planted a seed of hope that grew with each passing day. For 2 weeks, the girl religiously kept her Tuesday and Friday appointments, always inventing small tasks to justify the food she took home. Teresa, in turn, began planning larger meals and setting aside items that might be useful for a street child. It was on one of these Friday afternoons, as Lily was helping hang clothes on the line in the backyard, that Teresa asked the question she had been avoiding. "Lily, dear, can I tell you something?" The older woman stopped hanging a blouse and turned to the girl. "You're not eating all this food I give you, are you?" Lily's heart raced. She had been careful, always eating in front of Teresa to avoid raising suspicion. But apparently, she hadn't been careful enough. "Yes, I am, Mrs. Teresa," she lied, continuing to hang a sheet on the line. "My dear, I've worked with families for over 40 years. I know when a child is hiding something." Teresa approached and gently took Lily's small hands. "You're sharing this food with someone, aren't you?" The tears Lily had been holding back for weeks finally overflowed. All the pressure, all the fear, all the responsibility she carried on her small shoulders collapsed at once. She threw herself into Teresa's arms, sobbing like the child she was, but whom she had been forced to stop being long ago. "I can't tell you," she whimpered between tears. "It's dangerous. If anyone finds out, they'll hurt her and the baby." Teresa felt her heart ache. She hugged Lily tightly, letting the girl cry out all her accumulated fear before trying to talk again. "Is someone threatening you, my child?" Lily nodded against Teresa's chest. "There's a man at the market who wants me to tell him people's secrets. And there are other men looking for her. They're offering money to anyone who tells them where she is." "And this, her. Is she someone special to you?" "She saved a baby, and now she needs to hide because bad people want to get her." Lily raised her red eyes to Teresa. "I can't let anything bad happen to them." Teresa was silent for a long moment, processing the fragmented information. A woman with a baby in hiding, men offering money for information, threats to a 4-year-old child. There was something very wrong with this story, and her life experience told her that innocent people were in danger. "Lily, do you trust me?" "I trust you." "Then let me help you. If there are bad people after this young woman, she needs an adult's help too. But if you get involved, it could be dangerous for you too." Teresa smiled sadly. "Dear, I've lived 67 years. I've seen a lot of evil in the world, but I've also seen that sometimes good people need to help each other. If you're willing to risk yourself for these strangers, I can do my part too." The decision was made. That afternoon, for the first time in over a month, Lily led someone to the abandoned shack. Teresa followed her through the winding paths of the outskirts, carrying a bag with baby medicine, diapers she had bought with her own savings, and a pot of hot soup. When they arrived, Magnolia was sitting in a corner of the shack, rocking a persistently coughing Leo. Upon seeing a strange woman, she instinctively shrank back, pulling the baby closer to her chest. "Don't be afraid," Teresa said softly, placing the bag on the ground and raising her hands to show she had no aggressive intentions. I'm a friend of Lily's. I've come to help. Magnolia looked at Lily, who nodded encouragingly. Mrs. Teresa is good. She's been taking care of me. It was when Teresa got close enough to see Magnolia's face clearly that something clicked in her memory. Those eyes, the shape of her nose, the curve of her mouth. She knew those features, not from Magnolia herself, but from photographs she had seen during the 3 years she worked at the Hawthorne Ridge estate more than a decade ago. "My God," she whispered, the bag slipping from her hands. "You're Walter Hawthorne's daughter-in-law." The terror that flooded Magnolia's face was instant and absolute. She staggered to her feet, clutching Leo to her chest. "Do you work for him? Did he send you here?" "No, no." Teresa held out her hands in a gesture of peace. "I worked there over 10 years ago. I was fired for seeing things I shouldn't have seen." "What kind of things?" Magnolia asked, still wary but not moving. Teresa took a deep breath, the painful memories flooding back. "I saw Walter beating your husband when he was a child. I saw him altering land deeds in his office, and I saw him threatening people who questioned the land deals he was making." The revelation left Magnolia breathless. Evan. His father used to beat him, a lot. And when I tried to interfere once, Walter fired me on the spot, said if I told anyone, he'd make sure I never got a job anywhere again. Teresa approached slowly. "Dear, I know who this man is. I know what he's capable of. And that's exactly why I want to help you." Lily watched the conversation intently, processing information she didn't fully understand, but realizing there was a much bigger connection between the people in her life than she had imagined. "Mrs. Teresa knows the bad man who wants to get you." "I do, my child, and I know he won't stop until he gets what he wants." Teresa looked directly at Magnolia. "He's after your land, isn't he?" Magnolia nodded weakly. "My father left a large property to me in his will. Walter wants me to transfer it all to Evan's name, but in practice, he would be the one controlling everything. And that's why he's trying to prove you're crazy." "How do you know that?" "Because he's done it before, with other people who had land he wanted." Teresa sat on the floor of the shack, motioning for Magnolia to do the same. "I have documents saved at home, papers I took from his office before I was fired, names of people who lost their properties under suspicious circumstances." The silence that followed was heavy with possibilities and dangers. Magnolia looked at the baby in her arms, then at Lily, who had risked everything to protect them, and finally at Teresa, who had just offered to enter a war against one of the most powerful men in the region. "If you help me," she said slowly, "you'll become a target for him too." "We're already his targets," Teresa replied. "Lily is being blackmailed by someone who works for him, and I have information that could destroy his reputation. The difference is that together, we can protect ourselves better." That night, the 3 women, a young fugitive mother, a hard-working elderly woman, and an orphan child, formed an unlikely alliance against an enemy who seemed infinitely more powerful than them. But as they planned their next steps, none of them suspected their conversation was being watched. Outside the shack, hidden among the dry weeds, Arthur Vance was writing down every word in his notebook. The situation had become considerably more complicated with the involvement of a third person, especially someone who seemed to have compromising information about his employer. It was time to inform Walter that the operation needed to be accelerated. His phone vibrated quietly. It was a message from Marvin Stokes. "The girl didn't show up at the market today. I think she's suspicious. What should I do?" Arthur quickly typed the reply. "Keep pressing. I might have definitive answers on their location tomorrow." Meanwhile, at the Hawthorne Ridge estate, Evan Hawthorne paced restlessly through the halls of the main house. He hadn't slept properly in 3 weeks, tormented by nightmares where he saw Magnolia and his son in danger. His father insisted she had run away due to mental imbalance, but something inside him screamed that there was a very different truth behind his wife's disappearance. That night, on impulse, he decided to search his father's office for clues about what had really happened. It was while rummaging through the papers on the desk that he found something that made his blood run cold. Property deeds with names he recognized from his childhood. Small farmers who had mysteriously lost their land years ago. And among the documents, a folder with the name Magnolia Hawthorne, Involuntary Commitment, containing already filled-out forms for a private psychiatric clinic. The discovery of the documents in Walter's office left Evan in a state of shock. He stayed up all night rereading the papers, each line revealing a side of his father he had never imagined existed. The fraudulent contracts, the forged signatures, the false medical reports, it all formed a terrifying pattern of manipulation and theft that spanned decades. But it was when he found the involuntary commitment forms with Magnolia's name that he understood the true scope of his father's plan. His wife hadn't run away because of mental instability. She had run away because she discovered she was going to be forcibly committed to a private psychiatric clinic, where she would remain indefinitely while Walter assumed full control of her properties. When the sun rose over the Hawthorne Ridge estate, Evan had made a decision that would change his life forever. He took the most compromising documents, put them in a folder, and left the house without explaining himself to anyone. He had to find Magnolia before it was too late. Meanwhile, in the abandoned shack, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Leo had spent the night with a high fever, and Magnolia was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. The medications Teresa had brought were not enough to control the baby's respiratory infection. He coughed incessantly and could barely nurse. "He needs a doctor," Teresa said, touching the baby's hot forehead. "This fever could be dangerous." "I can't take him to the hospital," Magnolia replied desperately. "They'll ask questions, they'll want documents, they'll find out who I am." "Then he could get much worse," Teresa insisted. "Dear, sometimes we have to take risks to save the ones we love." Lily, who had spent the morning watching the two adult women debate without reaching a solution, decided to take the initiative. "I know a place," she said. "There's a nurse who helps street people. She doesn't ask a lot of questions." The place Lily knew was a community health post run by Sister Agnes, a nun who had dedicated her life to caring for the most needy. The post operated out of a simple, adapted house where she provided free care to people who couldn't afford medical attention. "But it's still risky," Magnolia pondered. "What if someone recognizes me?" "We'll disguise you," Lily suggested. "Mrs. Teresa can lend you different clothes. We'll change your hair." And so, in the middle of the afternoon, 3 figures walked through the dusty streets of Oakhaven towards the community post. Magnolia wore a simple dress of Teresa's, a scarf covering part of her face, and borrowed sunglasses. She carried Leo wrapped in a blanket, while Lily and Teresa flanked her as if they were an ordinary family seeking medical care. Sister Agnes was a middle-aged woman with gentle hands and compassionate eyes that made no judgments. When she saw the baby's feverish state, she immediately took them to a room in the back of the post, away from prying eyes. "How long has he been like this?" she asked, examining Leo carefully. "Since last night," Magnolia replied, trying to disguise her voice. "It's a respiratory infection. It's not serious if treated properly, but it can get complicated if we don't take care of it." Sister Agnes gave the baby an injection and prepared a bottle of liquid antibiotic. "He'll need to take this for a week, and you need to keep him in a cleaner, more ventilated environment." As the nun prepared the medications, she noticed details that her experience with families in hardship had taught her to observe. The young woman had hands too soft to be a manual laborer. Her clothes were simple but didn't match her posture, and most importantly, There was a fear in her eyes that went beyond concern for a sick baby. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" she asked discreetly as she wrapped up the medicines. Teresa and Magnolia looked at each other, but it was Lily who answered, "Sometimes people ask too many questions, sister." The nun smiled, understanding the message. "You're right. The important thing is that the baby gets well." She handed the medications to Magnolia. "If you need anything else, you can come back, and don't worry. I don't usually remember the faces of the people I treat here." Leaving the post, the three felt relieved but still tense. Leo already seemed a little better with the medication, but the risk of exposure had been great. It was as they were walking down the main street that Teresa spotted something that made her heart race. "Quick!" she whispered, pulling Magnolia and Lily into a fabric store. "That man up ahead, that's Arthur Vance." Through the shop window, they could see a tall man in a dark suit talking to some people on the sidewalk, showing a photograph and asking questions. Even from a distance, it was clear that it was a systematic search. "Does he work for Walter?" Magnolia asked, her voice trembling. "He does. He's known in town as a private investigator. If he's here, it means they're close to finding you." They remained hidden in the store until Arthur moved on, but the encounter had made it clear that the net was closing in. They needed to change their strategy quickly. "We can't stay in the shack anymore," Teresa said when they finally left the store. "He'll find the place sooner or later." "But where can we go?" Magnolia asked, desperate. "To my house," Teresa replied without hesitation. "It's small, but it's safer than an abandoned place, and I can take better care of the baby there. I can't accept. You've already done so much for us. Dear, when I worked at your father-in-law's estate, I witnessed many injustices. I never had the courage to do anything back then because I needed the job. Now I have a chance to do what's right." That night, for the first time in weeks, Magnolia and Leo slept in a real bed in the spare room of Teresa's house. The baby, medicated and in a clean environment, finally managed to rest without coughing. Magnolia, for her part, cried silently with gratitude and relief. Lily slept on the living room sofa, but woke up several times during the night. Something was bothering her, a sense of danger she couldn't explain. It was the third time she woke up that she heard footsteps outside the house. Silently, she approached the window and peeked through the curtains. A man was walking slowly down the sidewalk, stopping occasionally to look at the houses. Even in the darkness, she recognized the tall, thin silhouette of Arthur Vance. He had found their hiding place. Lily ran to the room where Magnolia was sleeping and woke her gently. "He's here," she whispered. "The man who was looking for you today. He's outside." The terror that filled Magnolia's face was immediate. She picked up Leo, still drowsy from the medication, and woke Teresa. "We need to leave," Magnolia said in a panic. "Now!" "Calm down," Teresa replied, forcing herself to think clearly. "We'll go out the back. I know the neighbors behind us. I can ask for help." But when they headed to the kitchen, they discovered another man positioned in the backyard. They were surrounded. Then they heard firm knocks on the front door, followed by an authoritative voice. "Teresa Miller? I'm a private investigator. I need to ask you a few questions about an acquaintance of yours." In the silence that followed, only the accelerated breathing of the three women and the panicked heartbeats echoed in the small house. Lily looked at Magnolia holding Leo, then at Teresa, who had risked everything to help them, and made a decision that would change the course of everything. "I'll open the door," she whispered. "Pretend you're asleep in the back room. I'll distract him." "No," Magnolia protested. "It's too dangerous." "I'm a better liar than you are," Lily insisted, with the fierce determination of someone who had survived alone on the streets. "Trust me." Lily opened the door just a crack, pretending to have been woken by the noise. She rubbed her eyes and yawned, perfectly portraying a sleepy child disturbed in the middle of the night. "Hi, mister," she said in a drawl. "Mrs. Teresa's sleeping. She works a lot and gets tired. Arthur Vance bent down to her level, studying her face intently. It was definitely the child he had been watching, but she seemed genuinely surprised to see him. "Hi, dear. I'm an investigator, and I need to ask Mrs. Teresa a few questions. Could you get her for me? She told me never to wake her up at night, unless it was really important." Lily scratched her head, keeping up the act. "Is it really important?" "It is. It's about a friend of hers who might be in danger." Lily pretended to hesitate, as if processing the information. "Okay, I'll get her, but she's going to be mad at me." She closed the door and ran to the room where Magnolia and Teresa were hiding. "He wants to talk about a friend in danger. I think he suspects, but he's not sure yet." "What are we going to do?" Magnolia whispered, clutching Leo to her chest. "I'll talk to him," Teresa decided. "If I pretend I don't know anything, maybe he'll go away." "It won't work," Lily muttered. "He's smart, but I have an idea." The girl quickly explained her plan. It was risky, but it might be the only way to buy them time to escape. Teresa nodded, even knowing she was putting everything at risk. When Teresa opened the door, she was wearing an old robe with her hair disheveled, perfectly playing the part of someone woken in the middle of the night. "Good evening, sir. Lily said it's about a friend of mine in danger." "I'm Arthur Vance, private investigator." He showed a badge. "I'm looking for a young woman with a baby, Magnolia Hawthorne. I have information that you may have been in contact." "Magnolia Hawthorne?" Teresa frowned as if trying to remember. "That name sounds familiar." "Oh, yes. I worked at the family's estate years ago, but it's been a long time since I've seen anyone from there. She disappeared a few weeks ago with her newborn son. The family is very worried." "Oh, that's a terrible situation." Teresa managed to sound genuinely concerned. "But I can't help. As I said, it's been years since I've had contact with anyone from that family." Arthur watched her face closely, looking for signs of a lie. Teresa held his gaze calmly, using all her life experience to maintain her composure. "Didn't you find it strange that a street kid like Lily showed up at your house?" "A street kid?" Teresa looked at Lily with feigned surprise. "She's not a street kid, she's my granddaughter." The lie came out so naturally that even Lily was surprised. Arthur frowned, clearly confused. "Your granddaughter?" "My daughter's child who lives in Atlanta. She's spending a few weeks with me for school vacation." Teresa placed a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. "Why do you ask?" "There have been reports of a child with similar characteristics helping someone hide in town. Well, as you can see, she's here with me, and now, if you'll excuse me, I have to work early tomorrow." Arthur hesitated. Something wasn't right, but he couldn't pinpoint what. Teresa's story seemed coherent, and the child was indeed in her house. Maybe his suspicions were wrong. "Thank you for your time, Mom. If you remember anything about Magnolia Hawthorne, please contact me." He handed a card to Teresa. "The family is offering a reward for information. Of course, I'll call if I think of anything." After Arthur left, the three remained silent for several minutes, listening intently for any noise that might indicate he was still nearby. Only when they were sure he was gone did they allow themselves to breathe a sigh of relief. "That was very risky," Magnolia said, still trembling. "But it worked," Lily replied. "He's gone." "For now," Teresa added. "He'll be back. And next time, he might bring more people." "Then we have to leave Oakhaven," Magnolia concluded. "I can't put you in danger anymore." "Where would you go with a baby and no money?" Teresa asked. "No, dear. We have to think of another strategy." Just then, they heard a different knock on the door, softer, more hesitant. The three looked at each other, tense. Was it Arthur coming back? But when Lily peeked through the window, she saw a young man alone, looking nervous and tired. "It's a different man," she whispered. "Younger, and he's alone." Teresa approached the door. "Who is it?" My name is Evan Hawthorne. I'm looking for my wife, Magnolia, and my son, Leo. The silence that followed was deafening. Magnolia turned pale. Clutching Leo so tightly the baby began to whimper. It was her husband's voice, but how had he found this address? Magnolia, if you're in there, please listen to me, Evan continued through the door. I found out the truth about my father. I know you ran away because he wanted to have you forcibly committed. I found the documents in his office. Magnolia covered her mouth with her hand, tears starting to stream down her face. Was it a trap, or had Evan really discovered his father's plans? I brought the papers with me, he continued. Fraudulent contracts, false medical reports, involuntary commitment documents with your name. I know you must be scared, but you need to know I'm on your side now. Lily looked at Magnolia. He sounds like he's telling the truth. It could be a trap, Magnolia murmured. Walter could have sent him to say these things. Magnolia, Evan's voice broke. Do you remember the song you used to sing to Leo when he was in your belly? Rock-a-bye baby on the treetop. You always said you were going to teach him not to be afraid of anything. That intimate memory made Magnolia break down in tears. Only she and Evan knew about that song, about those private moments during her pregnancy when she still believed they would have a happy family. It's really him, she sobbed. It's my husband. Teresa cautiously opened the door. Evan stood alone, holding a folder of documents with deep dark circles under his eyes and wrinkled clothes that indicated he had been searching for hours. Evan, Magnolia called out timidly, appearing at the bedroom door with Leo in her arms. When Evan saw his wife and son, he fell to his knees on the living room floor, sobbing loudly. Magnolia, forgive me. I didn't know. I had no idea what my father was planning. How did you find us? She asked, still keeping her distance. I followed the clues his investigator let slip. I overheard a phone conversation where he mentioned this house. Evan held out the folder to her. Look at these documents. They're proof of everything my father has done for years. Land theft, forged documents, bribing doctors to declare people mentally incompetent. Magnolia took the folder with trembling hands and began to leaf through the papers. It was worse than she had imagined. Walter had built an empire based on fraud, using the estate as a base for operations that had ruined dozens of small families in the region. There's more, Evan said. I found evidence that he was drugging you during your pregnancy. He paid a doctor to prescribe sedatives disguised as prenatal vitamins. I knew it, Magnolia murmured. I knew something was wrong. But he always said they were necessary vitamins. Teresa, who had remained silent, finally spoke up. I have documents too. I kept papers from when I was fired from the estate, names of people who lost their properties under suspicious circumstances. Then we can expose him, Evan said, a spark of hope shining in his eyes. We can gather all the evidence and take it to the authorities. But Lily, who was watching everything with her street-smart perceptiveness, asked the question no one wanted to hear. And what if he finds out you're teaming up against him? What will he do? The answer came in the form of car headlights illuminating the house's windows. Several vehicles had stopped on the street, and the shadows of men moved outside. Walter Hawthorne had decided it was time to solve the problem personally. The car headlights cut through the darkness of the street like searchlights, turning Teresa's small house into the center of a siege that seemed to have no escape. Walter Hawthorne had brought 5 men with him, including Arthur Vance, and was now walking slowly toward the front door with the confidence of someone sure of victory. Back exit, whispered Evan, grabbing Magnolia's arm. Quick. But when they headed to the kitchen, they discovered men positioned in the backyard as well. They were completely surrounded. Teresa looked out the living room window and saw Walter standing on the sidewalk, adjusting his tie with the same coldness he displayed in his dirtiest deals. Evan, shouted Walter's deep voice, I know you're in there. Come out and bring your family. Let's resolve this like civilized people. Evan took a deep breath, looked at Magnolia holding Leo, then at Lily and Teresa, two women and a child who had risked everything to protect his family and were now paying the price for their courage. "I'm going out," he said. "Maybe I can negotiate with him." "No," Magnolia protested. "You saw the documents. He's capable of anything." "That's exactly why I have to try." Evan kissed her forehead and the baby's. "Stay here until I signal it's safe." But before he could move, the front door swung open. Arthur had forced the lock and entered, followed by two large men who were clearly not investigators, but hired muscle for intimidation. "Good evening, family," Walter said, entering last with a chilling smile. "What an interesting gathering we have here." He surveyed the room with disdain, his eyes lingering on each person before settling on Magnolia. She was visibly thinner, in simple clothes with disheveled hair, a very different version of the elegant daughter-in-law he had tried to control on the estate. "Magnolia, my dear, you gave us quite a scare. Evan was desperate, couldn't sleep a wink." His voice was syrupy, but there was a coldness behind it that would make anyone tremble. "And look how thin our little Leo is. This is no environment to raise a child." "Ooh, he's fine," Magnolia replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "And I'm not going back to be committed to a psychiatric clinic." Walter laughed, a dry, unpleasant sound. "Committed? Who said anything about commitment?" "You're getting things confused, my dear. It must be the postpartum stress affecting your mind." "Dad, stop it," Evan intervened, stepping forward. "I found the documents in your office. I know everything." "What documents, my son?" Walter continued to smile, but his eyes turned dangerous. "You've been very stressed lately. Maybe you need a rest too." It was then that Teresa spoke up, her voice trembling but determined. "I have documents too, Walter. Papers I kept when you fired me from the estate 10 years ago." The smile vanished from Walter's face. He turned slowly toward Teresa, recognizing her for the first time. Teresa Miller, the snooping maid who couldn't stay in her place. "The maid who saw you beat a child and alter property contracts in your office," she retorted, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. "Stories from a resentful woman who was fired for incompetence," Walter said with disdain. "No one would believe a word you say against me." It was then that Lily, who had remained quiet in a corner, stepped forward. "And what if it's not just her word?" Walter noticed the girl for the first time, frowning. "Who is this child?" "Someone who's seen a lot," Lily replied with a courage that impressed even herself. "Someone who knows how you treat people." Arthur whispered something in Walter's ear, who nodded with growing irritation. "Ah, yes, the little informant who's been causing trouble." He approached Lily, trying to intimidate her with his imposing presence. "A street kid no one will miss if she disappears." "Don't touch her," Magnolia said fiercely, placing herself between Walter and Lily. "Or what? You'll stop me." Walter laughed again. "My dear Magnolia, you don't understand your situation. You have nowhere to run, no money, no family. Your parents are deceased. You have no siblings. I am the only family you and your son have left." "She has us," Teresa said, surprising everyone with the firmness in her voice. "She's not alone. You." Walter looked around with disdain. "An unemployed maid, an abandoned child, and my son who depends on me for everything." He turned to Evan. "Or have you forgotten that the estate is in my name? That your bank account is a subsidiary of mine? That your car, your clothes, everything you own comes from me?" Evan paled, realizing for the first time the extent of his financial dependence on his father. But it was Magnolia who answered. "That doesn't matter. I'd rather starve than live under your threats." "How noble," Walter said sarcastically. "But you're not thinking about your son, are you? Leo deserves to grow up with privileges, education, opportunities, not in an abandoned shack eating market scraps." The accusation hit Magnolia like a punch. Was it true That she couldn't offer Leo the same material comfort he would have at the estate? And did that mean she was being selfish by running away? "I see you're starting to reason," Walter continued, noticing her hesitation. "Come home with me. Sign the property transfer papers and secure your son's future. In return, I promise there will be no more talk of commitment." "And if I refuse?" Magnolia asked. Walter smiled coldly. "Then I'll use my contacts to prove you're an unfit mother. I have doctors who will attest to your mental instability, social workers who will confirm you're raising a child in unsanitary conditions. I will get custody of Leo one way or another." "That's blackmail," Evan protested. "That's business," Walter corrected. "And now, Magnolia, what is your decision?" The silence that followed was tense and suffocating. Magnolia looked at Leo sleeping in her arms, then at Evan, Teresa, and Lily, people who had risked everything to protect her. How could she choose between her son's financial security and everyone's freedom? It was then that Marvin Stokes appeared at the door, accompanied by two men Lily didn't recognize. "Sorry for the delay, Mr. Hawthorne. Had to finish some business at the market." The sight of Marvin made Lily's heart race. He had been her forced informant, the person who blackmailed her for information. Now he was clearly on Walter's side. "Perfect," Walter said. "Now we have enough witnesses to confirm we found Magnolia in a state of mental distress, neglecting the care of her baby." "That's a lie," Teresa shouted. "It's your word against ours," Walter replied calmly, "and I have more credibility in this town." At that moment, with 7 men blocking all exits, Magnolia realized she had completely underestimated her father-in-law's power and cruelty. He hadn't just come for her signature on the documents. He had come to destroy any resistance she might offer. "You have 5 minutes to decide," Walter said, consulting his expensive watch. "After that, I resolve the situation my way." Lily looked at Magnolia, seeing the desperation grow in her eyes. The woman who had saved a baby from hypothermia was now about to lose everything because of the greed of a man who showed no compassion for anyone. But the 4-year-old girl who had survived alone on the streets was not willing to give up without a fight. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said in her childish voice, drawing everyone's attention, "are you sure you want to do this?" "Why should a child like you concern me?" he replied with disdain. Lily smiled, a smile that didn't match her age. It was too clever, too knowing. "Because I know where you hid the other documents, the ones that aren't in the estate office." Lily's comment about hidden documents made Walter freeze mid-motion, his eyes narrowing as he studied the girl with new attention. There was something in the way she had said it, with a certainty that didn't match her age, that deeply unsettled him. "What are you talking about, child?" he asked, trying to maintain a tone of disdain but clearly disturbed. "I'm small," Lily replied calmly. "People don't pay attention to me, but I pay attention to everything." She took a step forward, completely ignoring the armed men around her. "I know about the box buried behind the old church, the one with papers with names of people you made disappear." The silence that followed was so absolute that the sound of Leo's breathing seemed to echo through the entire room. Walter had visibly paled, and Arthur exchanged a worried glance with his boss. "You're lying," Walter said. But there was an uncertainty in his voice that wasn't there before. "Want to bet?" Lily retorted. "I can draw you a map of where it's buried. I can tell you how many steps it is from the big tree to the exact spot." Evan looked at the girl with growing astonishment. How could a 4-year-old child know such specific information? And why was she risking so much to protect his family? Magnolia, realizing that Lily was creating a diversion, seized the moment to whisper quickly to Teresa, "If she can buy us time, get the documents I brought and go out the bedroom window. Get help." Walter approached Lily, crouching to her level. When he spoke, his voice had a coldness that made everyone in the room shiver. Listen carefully, child. I don't know what game you're playing, but it's not smart to play with things you don't understand. I understand more than you think, Lily replied, holding his gaze without blinking. I understand that you're scared, very scared. Scared of a street kid? Scared that people will find out who you really are. Lily tilted her head with an innocence that contrasted with her words. You're not as important as you think. You're just an old man who steals things from other people. The rage that erupted in Walter's eyes was instant and dangerous. He raised his hand as if to slap the girl, but Evan moved quickly, placing himself between them. Don't touch her, Evan said, his voice laced with an authority he had never shown before. That's enough, Dad. This has gone too far. Get out of the way, Evan. This child is trying to manipulate us with lies. And what if they're not lies? Evan looked directly into his father's eyes. What if she really knows about things you've hidden? How many other families have you destroyed besides the ones I found in the documents? Walter stood up slowly, realizing he was losing control of the situation. His own men were starting to exchange uneasy glances, and even Arthur seemed to be questioning the wisdom of continuing to pressure a child who clearly knew more than she should. Marvin, Walter said, turning to the market manager, you've known this girl longer. Has she ever shown this kind of knowledge before? Marvin hesitated, remembering the strange encounters with Lily, how she always seemed to know things a common street kid shouldn't. She's different from the other kids in town. She's always known things she shouldn't. What kind of things? About where people hid money, about family fights, about... Marvin stopped, realizing he was revealing more than he intended. Continue, Walter ordered. About deals some businessman made on the side. She brought me very specific information a few times. Lily watched this exchange intently, realizing her reputation for knowing secrets was working in her favor. It was true that during her life on the streets, she had witnessed many conversations people thought were private, but now she was using it strategically. So you know about my business too, Walter said, turning his attention back to her. I know you're not the real owner of half the land you claim to own, Lily replied. I know you stole documents from families who left town, and I know you're afraid someone will find out where the real owners are. That last statement made Walter take a step back. How was it possible that a child knew about the families he had forced to leave Oakhaven after stealing their properties? You're guessing, he said, but his voice no longer held the same confidence. Do you really want to bet on that? Lily insisted. Because if I'm right, you're going to have much bigger problems than a runaway daughter-in-law. At that moment, Teresa seized the distraction to sneak towards the room where she had stored her documents. No one noticed her movement, all focused on the confrontation between the child and the powerful man. Magnolia, sensing the opportunity, whispered to Evan, "We need to get out of here now. Lily is buying us time, but she won't be able to fool him for much longer." Evan nodded, but before they could move, Arthur approached Walter. "Sir, maybe we should handle this in private. Too many people knowing about your business could be complicated." Walter looked around the room, counting how many witnesses there were to his confrontation with a 4-year-old child. He was right. The situation was spinning out of control in a way that could compromise him. "Everyone out," he ordered his men. "Except you," he said, pointing at Lily. "You stay here with me. We're going to have a private conversation about this information you claim to have." "No," Magnolia said immediately. "She's not staying alone with you." "It's not your decision," Walter retorted. "This child has made very serious accusations. I need to verify if they're true or just the fantasy of an abandoned girl." It was then that Lily did something no one expected. She ran to Magnolia and clung to her leg like a frightened child seeking protection. "I don't want to be alone with him," she said, her voice reverting to its earlier childish tone. The transformation was so sudden that for a moment everyone was confused. The brave girl who had confronted Walter had vanished, replaced by a clearly terrified child. "Please," Lily pleaded, looking up at Magnolia with tears in her eyes, "don't leave me alone with the bad man." Magnolia felt her heart break. Lily had risked everything to protect them, and now she was paying the price for her courage. She hugged the girl protectively, looking defiantly at Walter. "She is not staying alone with you. If you want to talk to her, it will be in my presence." "How touching," Walter said sarcastically. "The fugitive protecting the abandoned child. But you two don't understand. I'm not asking for permission." He signaled to Arthur, who moved to separate Lily from Magnolia. But at that exact moment, they heard sirens approaching in the distance. Walter's face transformed into a mask of fury. "Who called the police?" It was then that Teresa appeared at the bedroom door, holding a cell phone and smiling with satisfaction. "I did. And I also called the local newspaper. I thought they might like to know about a rich landowner intimidating women and children in the middle of the night." The sirens were getting closer, and through the window, they could already see the red and blue lights reflecting off the neighborhood houses. Walter realized he had completely lost control of the situation. "This isn't over," he said to Magnolia, but his voice no longer held the same authority. "You'll still have to sign those papers." "Never," Magnolia replied, holding Lily and Leo tightly. "I'd rather lose everything than give you that victory." Walter looked around the small room, at his son who defied him, at the daughter-in-law who refused to submit, at the maid who had kept evidence against him, and at the child who knew too many secrets. For the first time in decades, he found himself in a situation he couldn't control with money or intimidation. The arrival of the police completely changed the dynamic of the confrontation. Walter, who moments before had dominated the situation with authority and intimidation, now had to quickly adjust his posture to that of a concerned citizen searching for his missing daughter-in-law. "Evan," he whispered urgently, "remember that you are my son. Don't do anything that could harm our family." But Evan didn't answer. For the first time in his life, he was seeing his father for who he really was, not a successful businessman, but a cruel manipulator who destroyed lives to increase his fortune. The discovery of the documents had opened his eyes to decades of crimes he had ignored or rationalized. The sheriff who entered the house was a middle-aged man named Brody, known in town for his integrity. Teresa breathed a sigh of relief when she saw him. She had worked at his sister's house a few years back and knew he couldn't be influenced by money or social status. "Good evening," Sheriff Brody said, observing the scene with professional attention. "We received a call about a disturbance and intimidation. Can someone explain what's happening here?" Walter immediately took control of the narrative. "Sheriff Brody, glad you're here. I'm Walter Hawthorne, and this is my daughter-in-law, Magnolia." He gestured to her with a forced smile. "She disappeared from our estate a few weeks ago with my grandson, and we've finally found her. We're concerned about her mental stability. She has a history of postpartum depression." Magnolia felt her blood boil at the blatant lie, but before she could protest, Lily spoke up. "That's not true, Mr. Policeman," the girl said in her clear, decisive voice. "She ran away because he wanted to put her in a psychiatric hospital to steal her land." Brody crouched down to Lily's level, impressed by the seriousness in her eyes. "And who are you, dear?" "I'm Lily, and I've seen a lot of bad things this man has done," Walter laughed with disdain. "Sheriff, with all due respect, you can't give credit to the fantasies of a street kid. She's clearly been influenced by malicious people." "A street kid?" Brody looked at Teresa. "Does this girl live with you, Mom?" "She does," Teresa replied quickly. She's like my granddaughter. And I can assure you, she doesn't have fantasies. Everything she's saying is true. Evan stepped forward, the folder of documents still in his hands. Sheriff, I have evidence that proves what the girl is saying. My father has a history of fraudulent practices related to rural properties. Walter's expression hardened. Evan, you are making a mistake you will regret for the rest of your life. Nay, maybe, Evan replied, looking directly into his father's eyes, but I can no longer pretend I don't see who you really are. He handed the folder to Brody. These documents show years of fraud, bribery, and intimidation. The sheriff opened the folder and began to examine the papers, his expression growing more and more serious with each page. There were contracts with clearly different signatures, medical reports with altered dates, and correspondence that revealed a pattern of corruption that stretched throughout the region. Mr. Hawthorne, Brody said finally, I'm going to need you to come with me to the station for questioning about these documents. This is ridiculous, Walter protested. I am a respectable citizen of this town. I will not be humiliated by unfounded accusations made by an unstable woman and an abandoned child. And I have documents too, said Teresa, coming out of the room with an old box. I kept papers from when I worked on his estate, names of people who lost their land under suspicious circumstances. Walter realized the situation was deteriorating rapidly. He looked at Arthur and his other men, but they were already discreetly backing away, not wanting to be associated with a criminal investigation. Marvin, he said, turning to the market manager, tell the sheriff how this child has been trying to extort information from local merchants. But Marvin, seeing the direction events were taking, hesitated. Well, she did know things she shouldn't have, but... She knew because she overheard your conversations with Mr. Hawthorne about how to get information on families in town, Teresa interrupted. Lily told me how you blackmailed her to get that information. Brody looked at Marvin with renewed interest. Mr. Stokes, you'll also need to come to the station to clarify your involvement in this scheme. Marvin turned pale. I didn't know anything. I just did what Mr. Hawthorne told me to. Shut up, you idiot, Walter exploded, finally losing his composure. The mask of a respectable man had completely fallen, revealing the true, cruel nature behind it. It was at this moment that Magnolia found the courage to speak. Sheriff, during my pregnancy, my father-in-law mixed sedatives in my food without my knowledge. I'm sure I can prove it if necessary. And how do you intend to do that? Brody asked. Evan found correspondence between him and a private doctor, arranging the medications that would be administered to me. She looked at her husband, who nodded encouragingly. There are also involuntary commitment documents already filled out with my name for a clinic that doesn't even know me. Leo chose that moment to wake up and start crying, as if sensing the tension in the air. Magnolia rocked him gently, and Lily moved closer to help soothe him, creating a touching image of an improvised family united against adversity. Sheriff, Walter said, trying to regain some control, I'm willing to resolve this situation amicably. Perhaps we can find a middle ground that benefits everyone. Mr. Hawthorne, this is not a business negotiation, Brody replied firmly. We're talking about potentially serious crimes, document forgery, administration of medication without consent, attempted forced commitment, intimidation. He closed the folder of documents. I'm going to need all involved parties to come to the station for formal statements. And what about the child? Teresa asked, looking at Lily with concern. She will also have to give a statement. But given her age, it will be done in a special manner with appropriate psychological assistance. Lily looked at Magnolia, Evan, and Teresa, the people who had become her unlikely family. It's going to be okay, she said, demonstrating a maturity she shouldn't possess at her age. Now they can't hurt anyone anymore. Walter, realizing he had completely lost control of the situation, made one last desperate attempt. "Evan, you are still my son, still financially dependent on me. If you testify against me, you will lose everything, the estate, the money, your son's future." Evan looked at Magnolia holding Leo, then at Lily, who had risked everything to protect his family, and finally at his father, the man who had raised him but had never taught him what it truly meant to have integrity. "Dad," he said calmly, "I would rather raise my son without a penny to my name, but with a clear conscience, than have all the wealth in the world built on the suffering of others." Evan's response was the final blow. Walter realized he had lost not only control of the situation, but also the son he had always considered an extension of himself in business. For the first time in decades, he was truly alone. "Very well," Brody said, signaling to the other officers. "Mr. Hawthorne, Mr. Stokes, you are being detained for questioning. As for the rest of you, we ask that you accompany us to provide statements as witnesses." As Walter was led out of the house in handcuffs, he cast one last look of hatred at Lily. But the girl didn't lower her eyes. She had faced worse things than a cruel man during her life on the streets, and now she had a family to protect. Outside, several neighbors had gathered to watch the commotion. The news that the powerful Walter Hawthorne was being arrested would spread quickly through Oakhaven, and many people who had been wronged by him over the years would finally have hope for justice. "What's going to happen now?" Magnolia asked Brody as they walked towards the police cars. "Now, we will investigate every document, every complaint, every crime this man may have committed," the sheriff replied, "and you will all have the chance to rebuild your lives in freedom." The days following Walter's arrest were an emotional roller coaster for everyone involved. The Oakhaven Sheriff's Department became a hub of intense activity, with people constantly arriving to give statements about years of abuse and irregularities committed by the landowner. Magnolia had given her testimony the next morning, recounting in detail the months of psychological manipulation, the medication administered without her knowledge, and the threats of forced commitment. Sheriff Brody recorded every word carefully, building a case that seemed increasingly solid against Walter. Lily, for her part, gave her statement in a special room, accompanied by a child psychologist who was impressed by the maturity and precision of the information the girl provided. When asked how she knew so many details about Walter's business, Lily explained simply, "When you're invisible to adults, you end up hearing a lot of things you're not supposed to." Teresa handed over all the documents she had kept for years, papers that revealed a systematic pattern of fraud dating back more than 2 decades. Names of small farmers who had lost their properties under suspicious circumstances, contracts with altered clauses after signing, and correspondence showing bribery of public officials. Evan faced the most difficult situation. Testifying against his own father meant admitting that he had been complicit, even if unconsciously, in serious crimes. But it also meant finally freeing himself from a life built on lies and corruption. "For years, I thought my father was just a strict businessman," he told Sheriff Brody. "But when I found these documents in his office, I realized my entire life was funded by the suffering of others." It was on the 3rd morning after the arrest that something unexpected happened. Magnolia was at Teresa's house, nursing Leo and trying to process everything that had happened, when there was a knock on the door. On the other side was an elderly woman with white hair, accompanied by a young man carrying a leather briefcase. "My name is Eleanor Reed," the lady said in a firm voice. "I'm a retired lawyer, and this is my grandson, Dr. Ryan Reed, who now practices at my old firm. We came to talk about Walter Hawthorne." Teresa invited them in, curious about the reason for their visit. Eleanor had sharp eyes and a posture that demonstrated decades of experience dealing with difficult cases. "We followed the case in the local newspaper," she explained, and we want to offer our help free of charge. I see you're up against a powerful man, and I know from experience that people like him don't give up easily." "Walter is in jail," Magnolia said. "The sheriff said the evidence is very strong." "Pre-trial detention," Dr. Ryan corrected. "He can still be released if he gets a good lawyer to challenge the evidence. And believe me, men like him always get the best lawyers." Eleanor approached Lily, who was watching the conversation silently. "And you, dear, are the brave girl who stood up to this terrible man." Lily nodded shyly. There was something about the elderly lawyer's presence that made her feel safe, as if she had finally found an adult who truly understood the seriousness of the situation. "Can I ask you a question?" Eleanor continued. "How did you know about the hidden documents you mentioned on the night of the arrest?" It was then that Lily revealed something that left everyone speechless. "Because I saw him bury the box. It was about 2 years ago. I was sleeping near the old church when he showed up with 2 men in the middle of the night. I thought they were grave robbers, so I stayed hidden and watched." "And you remember exactly where it was buried?" asked Dr. Ryan, clearly interested. "I do. I counted the steps from the big tree to the spot. It's 27 steps toward the mountain, then 15 to the right." Eleanor and Dr. Ryan exchanged a significant look. If Lily was right, and if there really were important documents buried in that location, they would have enough evidence to ensure Walter could never harm anyone again. "Eleanor," Teresa said hesitantly, "may I ask why you're willing to help us for free? You don't know us." The elderly lawyer was silent for a moment, as if deciding how much she should reveal. Finally, she sighed and spoke. "Because Walter Hawthorne destroyed my family 20 years ago." The silence that followed was heavy with anticipation. Magnolia stopped rocking Leo, and even Lily paid full attention to the story that was about to be told. "My husband, God rest his soul, owned a coffee farm in the region. It wasn't large, but it was our life. Walter wanted that land because it was near a rural development project that was being planned." Eleanor paused, the painful memories resurfacing. "He forged documents proving my husband had debts that didn't exist, bribed clerks at the registry office to validate the false papers, and got an order to seize the property." "And you couldn't prove the documents were fake?" Evan asked. "We tried. I was a lawyer. I knew the law. I knew something was wrong. But Walter had connections in every important institution in the region. Judges, notaries, public officials. They were all in his pocket." Eleanor wiped away a tear that insisted on falling. "My husband couldn't bear to see his life's work being stolen. He had a heart attack and passed away 3 months after we lost the farm." Dr. Ryan continued the story. "My grandmother spent years trying to recover the property legally, but she never could. Walter was too powerful, had too many resources. When I graduated from law school, I promised her that one day we would get justice." "And now you have that opportunity," Magnolia said, understanding the personal dimension of their motivation. "Exactly. But it's not just about revenge," Eleanor clarified. "It's about justice. How many other families suffered like ours? How many people lost everything and never had a chance to fight back?" Lily, who had listened to the whole story with attention, stepped forward. "I can show you where the box is buried, but it has to be at night when no one is around." "Child, that could be dangerous," Teresa protested. "More dangerous than living on the street running from bad men?" Lily retorted with her relentless logic. "Besides, only I know exactly where it is. I have to go." That afternoon, as they planned the operation to recover the buried documents, disturbing news reached them. Sheriff Brody called to inform them that Walter had hired a lawyer from Atlanta, one of the best criminal defense attorneys in the state, and was questioning the legality of his arrest. "He's claiming he was the victim of a conspiracy," Brody explained over the phone. He says the documents were planted, the witnesses were coerced, and that it's all just an extortion attempt orchestrated by his enemies. But that's ridiculous, Magnolia protested. How can he claim the documents were planted if they were in his own office? Money buys a lot of creative explanations, Brody replied bitterly. His lawyer is filing for habeas corpus, claiming illegal imprisonment. If he succeeds, Walter could be released as early as tomorrow. The news hit the group like a bombshell. After everything they had been through, after finally finding the courage to face Walter, he could still get away with it. "We can't let that happen," Evans said with determination. "There has to be a way to keep him from getting out of jail." It was then that Dr. Ryan had an idea. What if we get the buried documents before the habeas corpus hearing? If there's really additional evidence in that box, it might be enough to maintain the pre-trial detention. "When is the hearing?" Eleanor asked. "Tomorrow afternoon," Brody replied. Lily looked out the window, watching the sun set over Oakhaven. "Then we have to go tonight," she said, with the determination of someone who had made an irrevocable decision. "It's our only chance." What none of them knew was that, at that very moment in the town jail, Walter was meeting with his lawyer and planning his own nighttime operation. If he couldn't get out of jail legally, he would use other methods to permanently silence the people who dared to challenge him. The final battle was about to begin, and this time it would be between those fighting for justice and a desperate man who had nothing left to lose. The old St. Jude's Chapel was on a hill away from the center of Oakhaven, an abandoned colonial building that had withstood the test of time with its stone walls and glassless windows. At midnight, 5 figures walked silently along the path leading to it, Lily guiding the way, followed by Dr. Ryan, Eleanor, Evan, and Teresa. Magnolia had reluctantly stayed home with Leo. She wanted to be part of the operation, but the baby still needed constant care, and everyone agreed it was better not to expose him to the risks of the night mission. "It's 27 steps from the big tree," Lily whispered, pointing to a century-old oak that dominated the small cemetery next to the chapel. "Then 15 to the right, towards the mountains." Dr. Ryan carried a small flashlight and some digging tools he had borrowed. Eleanor, despite her advanced age, had insisted on accompanying the operation personally. It was her chance to finally get justice for her husband's loss. They began digging at the spot Lily indicated, working in silence to avoid attracting unwanted attention. The ground was hard from the lack of rain, making the work more difficult than they expected. After 40 minutes of digging, Dr. Ryan began to question if they were in the right place. "Are you sure it was here?" he asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I'm sure," Lily replied firmly. "But maybe it's deeper than it looks." It was Evan who finally hit something solid with the shovel. "There's something here," he whispered excitedly. They intensified their digging around the object, gradually revealing a rusty metal box about the size of a shoebox. Eleanor held the box with trembling hands when Dr. Ryan lifted it from the hole. "Do we open it here or take it home?" she asked. "Here," Lily said. "If there's something bad in this box, we'd better know now." The box's lock had rusted over time, but gave way easily when Dr. Ryan forced it with a screwdriver. When they opened it, they found contents that surpassed their most optimistic expectations. Inside were dozens of documents protected in plastic bags, original deeds to rural properties with the true owners' names, unaltered contracts showing the real transactions, and most importantly, a handwritten ledger with detailed records of all the bribes paid by Walter over 20 years. "My God," Eleanor murmured, flipping through the ledger with a small flashlight. "There are names of judges, notaries, public officials. It's a complete record of systemic corruption." "And look at this," said Dr. Ryan, showing a specific deed. "Your family's farm, Grandma. Here is the original deed, proving there were never any outstanding debts." Tears streamed down Eleanor's face. After 20 years, she finally held in her hands the proof that her husband had been the victim of an elaborate fraud. But there was no time for emotions. They needed to get these documents to a safe place before anyone realized what they were doing. It was as they were preparing to leave that they heard the sound of cars approaching on the dirt road. Headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the abandoned chapel, and male voices echoed in the night. "Quick," whispered Dr. Ryan, stuffing the documents into a backpack. "Let's go out behind the church." But when they rounded the building, they discovered men posted on that side as well. They were surrounded. The voices grew closer, and they could make out instructions being given. "Search the whole area. If they're here, they can't have gone far." "How did they know?" Teresa murmured, panic evident in her voice. Lily, with her street survival experience, immediately thought of a solution. "The crypt," she said, pointing to a low entrance on the side of the chapel. "There's an old crypt under the chapel. We can hide there until they leave." The crypt entrance was partially blocked by stones and vegetation, but they managed to clear it enough to slip through one by one. The underground space was small and damp, with niches in the walls where the remains of local residents were once placed. It wasn't the most comfortable place to hide, but it was invisible to anyone searching on the surface. They crouched in the dark for nearly 2 hours, listening to the footsteps and voices of the men scouring the area. Lily recognized one of the voices. It was Arthur Vance, Walter's private investigator. Apparently, even while in jail, the landowner still had the resources to mobilize people. "Didn't find anything?" a frustrated voice said after a long time. "Are you sure they came here?" "The information was accurate," Arthur replied. "But maybe we were too late. Now what?" "Now we move to Plan B. If we can't stop them from finding the evidence, we'll make sure they can't use it." The sinister tone of the conversation made everyone in the crypt exchange worried glances. What was Plan B, and how had Walter found out about their nighttime operation? Only after the cars had driven completely away did they dare to leave the crypt. The fresh, pre-dawn air had never felt so good, but the sense of relief was short-lived. If Walter knew about the search for the documents, he probably also knew where they were hiding. "We need to warn Magnolia," Evan said urgently. "If they didn't find us here, they'll look at the house." They ran along the trail back to town, but when they reached Teresa's neighborhood, they realized their worst fears were confirmed. There were men watching the house, strategically posted on the corners, as if waiting for someone to try to enter. "How are we going to get to her?" Dr. Ryan asked. "It was Lily who had the idea. I know all the backyards in this neighborhood. I can get to the house from the back without being seen." "It's too dangerous," Eleanor protested. "I'm small and fast, and if something goes wrong, you can create a distraction at the front of the house while I escape with her and the baby out the back." There was no better alternative. Lily snuck through the neighboring yards, jumping fences and hiding among the plants, until she reached the window of the room where Magnolia was with Leo. She tapped lightly on the glass, making the young mother jump. "Lily, what's happening?" "There are men watching the house," the girl whispered through the slightly open window. "We found the papers." "But they found out. You need to get out of here now." Magnolia didn't hesitate. She grabbed Leo and a few essentials, climbing out the window with Lily's help. Together, they crossed the yards until they met the others on a parallel street. "Now what?" Magnolia asked, rocking Leo, who had woken up with the commotion. "Where are we going?" "To the sheriff's station," said Dr. Ryan. "It's the only place we'll be safe and can officially turn in these documents." But when they arrived at the station, they found it closed for the night, with only one officer on duty who wasn't authorized to receive evidence in such complex cases. They would have to wait until Sheriff Brody arrived in the morning. "We can't stay on the street until then," Teresa said. "They'll find us." It was then that Eleanor suggested something that changed everything. Let's go to the rectory. Father Anselmo is a man of integrity, and the church has always offered sanctuary to those who needed protection. It was a risky plan, but it might be their only option. They walked through the deserted streets of Oakhaven towards the downtown church, carrying with them not only the documents that could destroy Walter forever, but also the hope that they would finally find a safe place to wait for dawn. What they didn't know was that Walter, even in jail, had one last plan in motion. And this time, he was willing to do anything to protect his secrets, even if it meant crossing lines he had never crossed before. The night was not yet over, and the worst was yet to come. The Sacred Heart Church stood in the center of Oakhaven, an imposing 19th-century building that had withstood the test of time and the city's changes. Father Anselmo was known for his dedication to the needy and for never refusing help to anyone who knocked on his door, regardless of the hour or circumstances. When the group arrived at the rectory, it was almost 4 in the morning. The priest, a 60-year-old man with grey hair and kind eyes, answered the door still in his robe, but without showing any irritation at being awakened. "Father, we need help," said Eleanor, who knew the priest from her days of regular church attendance. "We are in danger and need a safe place until dawn." Father Anselmo looked at the group carefully. 2 elderly women, a young man, a mother with a baby, and a small child. They all looked exhausted and frightened, but there was something in their eyes that suggested they were fleeing a real injustice, not their own guilt. "Come in," he said without hesitation. "Let's talk in the rectory parlor." While he made coffee for everyone, the priest listened intently to the summary of the situation. He knew Walter Hawthorne by name, a man who attended church only on important social occasions, but who had never shown true faith or Christian charity. "These documents you found," he said, examining some of the papers Dr. Ryan showed him, "do they really prove this man's crimes?" "They prove decades of fraud, bribery, and theft," Eleanor replied. "But we're worried he'll get out of jail before we can officially submit the evidence." It was at that moment that they heard cars stopping in front of the church. Father Anselmo went to the window and saw 3 vehicles with men getting out, clearly looking for someone. "Stay in the church, in the sanctuary," the priest instructed quickly. "I will speak to them." The group moved towards the church altar, a space traditionally considered a sanctuary where even criminals had the right to temporary protection. Magnolia held Leo against her chest, trying to keep him calm, while Lily watched everything with the sharp attention of someone who had learned to assess dangers quickly. Father Anselmo went out to meet the men, who were led by Arthur Vance. "Good evening, or rather good morning," the investigator said with a false smile. "Sorry to bother you so early, Father, but we're looking for some people who might be in danger." "In danger of what?" the priest asked, his tone polite but firm. "They are people with mental health issues who have fled proper medical treatment. One of them is a young mother who may be putting her baby at risk." "And do you have a police warrant for this search?" Arthur hesitated. "We are acting on behalf of the concerned family. It's a matter of medical urgency." "I understand the concern," said Father Anselmo, "but as you can see, the church is empty. If these people need medical help, I suggest you contact the proper authorities in the morning." The men exchanged frustrated glances. They couldn't force their way into a church without a court order, and the priest was clearly not going to cooperate with an unofficial search. "If you see these people," Arthur said finally, "it's important that you contact us immediately. They could be dangerous." After the men left, Father Anselmo returned to the church, where he found the group hidden behind the main altar. "They're gone for now, but they'll be back. We have a few hours until dawn." It was during these waiting hours that something unexpected happened. Lily, who had been quieter than usual since they left the crypt, finally revealed something she had been holding back. "There's something I haven't told you," she said, looking at each person in the group, "about why I know so much about Walter." Everyone turned to her, curious and concerned by the serious tone in her voice. "My grandfather worked for him, a long time ago when I was still little." "Your grandfather?" Magnolia asked, surprised. "But you said you were an orphan." "I am an orphan. My parents passed away when I was 2, and my grandfather took care of me until I turned 3. Then he passed away too." Lily paused, the painful memories resurfacing. "He was a caretaker on one of the properties Walter stole. When the real owners lost the land, my grandfather was fired. He got sick from working so hard trying to find another job to take care of me." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Teresa approached Lily and hugged her, finally understanding where the girl's fierce determination to fight Walter came from. "That's why you knew so much about his business," said Dr. Ryan. "Your grandfather must have told you things." "My grandfather was an honest man," Lily continued, "but before he passed, he told me that one day someone would bring justice for what Walter did to so many families. He made me promise that if I ever had a chance to help, I would." "And you kept your promise," said Eleanor, moved. "Not yet," Lily replied. "I'll only have kept it when he's in jail forever, and the lands are returned to their rightful owners." As they talked, Father Anselmo received a phone call that changed everything. It was Sheriff Brody, informing him of a serious situation at the jail. "Walter Hawthorne tried to bribe a guard to get out during the night," Brody said over the phone. "The guard reported it, and now we have additional evidence of attempted bribery. But we urgently need the documents you found. His lawyer is pushing for the habeas corpus hearing to be held this morning." "We'll bring the documents right away," the priest replied. "Be careful. We have information that men connected to Walter are circling the town looking for you. Come through the back entrance of the station." When the sun finally rose over Oakhaven, the group prepared to leave the church. But before they left, Father Anselmo did something no one expected. He gathered them in a circle and asked them to hold hands. "I want to say a prayer," he said, "for all the families who have suffered at the hands of this cruel man, and for justice to finally be done." Lily, who had never been religious, felt something strange happen as the priest spoke. It was as if her grandfather were there with her, approving of her choices and giving her strength for what was yet to come. When they arrived at the station through the back entrance, they found Brody waiting with a team of officers and a district attorney who had come specially from Atlanta to oversee the case. "Are these the documents?" the DA asked, examining the contents of the box with growing interest. "My God, this is enough evidence to convict half the local government." "And the habeas corpus hearing?" Dr. Ryan asked. "Suspended indefinitely," and the DA replied with a smile. "With this evidence, not only will we keep Walter in jail, but we'll open investigations into every name mentioned in these documents." But it was Brody who delivered the most important news. And there's more. Marvin Stokes decided to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. He confessed that Walter maintained a network of informants throughout the town, blackmailing people to get information about families with valuable properties. At that moment, Lily realized that the promise she made to her grandfather was finally being fulfilled. Walter wasn't just a cruel man. He was the center of a corruption network that had destroyed countless families for decades. "What's going to happen now?" Magnolia asked, rocking Leo, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Now," the DA said, "we're going to rebuild the lives of all the families who were harmed. The stolen properties will be returned to their rightful owners or their heirs, and everyone involved in the corruption network will be held accountable for their crimes." Evan, who had remained quiet during the conversation, finally spoke. "And me. I'm his son. I lived off the wealth he stole from others. What happens to me?" "You," said Brody. Had the courage to do the right thing when it mattered. That counts for a lot in the end. But even with all the good news, Lily knew there was still one last surprise waiting for everyone. A discovery in Walter's documents that would change her own life in a way she could never have imagined. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.